A woman sat across from me 3 months ago. 71 years old, retired school librarian, sharp as a tack, no complaints except mild fatigue she blamed on age. Her lab work told a completely different story. Her kidneys were functioning at 38%. She had no idea. No pain, no swelling, no warning. Just decades of daily choices she thought were harmless, quietly destroying the organs that filter every drop of blood in her body. That is the cruelest thing about kidney disease. It does not announce itself until it is almost finished with you. I am Dr. Pablo. I am a board-certified geriatrician with 18 years of clinical experience working with adults over 60. And I want to be honest with you today in a way that most people in my position are not direct enough to be. There are things sitting in your kitchen right now, things you consumed this morning, things you will probably reach for again tonight, that are slowly, silently poisoning your kidneys. And the reason they are so dangerous is precisely because they do not feel dangerous. They feel normal. They feel like just another part of the day. Before we get into the list, I need you to understand something important about what age does to these organs. Because this is the part most videos skip, and it is the part that explains everything. Your kidneys filter your entire blood supply roughly 30 times every single day. Every toxin, every waste product, every excess mineral, it all passes through two organs the size of your fist. When you are young, they have enormous reserve capacity. They can absorb a lot of punishment and keep going. But after 60, that reserve starts to shrink. The filtration rate, what physicians call the GFR, the glomerular filtration rate, declines naturally with each passing decade. It is not a disease. It is biology. The problem is that most people do not know this is happening, and so they continue the same habits they have had for 40 years, not realizing that what their younger kidneys could handle without blinking is now leaving permanent marks. Those marks accumulate, slowly, silently, over years. And one day, a lab result comes back, and a doctor has to sit across from someone and explain that a significant portion of their kidney function is already gone. I have had that conversation more times than I can count, and every single time the person looks at me and says the same thing. They say, "But I felt fine." That is exactly what makes this so urgent. Feeling fine is not the same as being fine. Not when it comes to your kidneys. Now, I have put together a list of 4 silent poisons. The 4 things most likely to be destroying kidney function in adults over 60 right now. I have ordered them from serious to catastrophic, and I want to warn you early. Number 1 on this list is something you almost certainly consume today. Something the food industry has spent billions of dollars making sure you find irresistible. We will get there, but I want you to stay with me through the full list, because each one of these builds on the last. By the time we reach number 1, you will understand not just what it is, but exactly why it is so devastating, and what you can do starting today to protect yourself. Let us begin with number 4. And this one tends to surprise people, because it is not something you eat or drink at all. It is something you stop doing. Poison number 4 is a sedentary lifestyle. And before you tell me you already know movement is important, I want you to hear what actually happens inside your kidneys when you sit for long stretches every day, because it is more specific and more serious than most people realize. Your kidneys depend on consistent, strong blood flow to do their job. Every one of those millions of tiny filters needs a steady current of oxygenated blood arriving to power the filtration process. When you are active, your cardiovascular system delivers that current reliably. When you are sedentary for hours, circulation slows, blood pools. The delivery of oxygen and nutrients to the kidney tissue becomes sluggish and inefficient. It is the difference between a fast-moving river that stays clean and clear and standing water that slowly turns. But that is just the direct effect. The indirect effects are where the real damage compounds. Prolonged inactivity drives insulin resistance. Insulin resistance leads to elevated blood sugar. Elevated blood sugar, sustained over months and years, begins to damage the delicate filtration structures inside the kidney. This is the opening chapter of diabetic kidney disease, and it can begin long before anyone ever receives a diabetes diagnosis. Inactivity also promotes weight gain, and every additional 10 pounds of body weight increases the pressure your heart must generate to push blood through your system. That pressure lands on your kidneys, day after day, year after year. I had a patient, Gerald, 67 years old, retired electrician, proud grandfather of 4. He came to me because his primary care doctor flagged some mild abnormalities in his kidney function. Gerald was not diabetic. He did not smoke. He watched his salt. By every measure he was aware of, he was doing things right. But Gerald had spent the last 6 years since retirement sitting in his recliner for 8 to 10 hours a day, watching sports, reading, doing crossword puzzles, things he had earned the right to enjoy, things that were costing him more than he knew. We made one primary change, not his diet, not his medications, just his movement. 30 minutes of walking broken into 3 10-minute segments throughout the day, standing up every hour, simple resistance exercises 3 times a week. 8 months later, his kidney function markers had stabilized and modestly improved. His blood pressure dropped 9 points without any medication change. Gerald told me he slept better, thought more clearly, and felt 20% younger. His words, not mine. The research supports exactly what Gerald experienced. A study published in the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology found that regular moderate physical activity was independently associated with slower progression of chronic kidney disease in older adults. Not running, not gym training, walking. Consistency over intensity, every single time. If you are watching this and you spend most of your day sitting, I want you to make one commitment before this video ends. Set an alarm. Every 60 minutes, stand up and move for 5 minutes. Walk to the kitchen, walk around the room, do 10 slow squats holding the back of a chair. That is it. That is the starting point. Your kidneys are not asking for a marathon. They are asking for a river, not a puddle. Give them that current, and they will serve you far longer than they would otherwise. Now let us move to poison number 3, and this one lives in almost every medicine cabinet in America. Poison number 3 is one I bring up with almost every patient over 60 that walks through my door, not because it is rare, because it is everywhere, and almost nobody thinks of it as a threat. I am talking about over-the-counter pain relievers, specifically the class of drugs known as NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, ibuprofen, naproxen, diclofenac. The pills millions of Americans reach for without a second thought for a sore knee, a stiff back, a tension headache. They are sold without a prescription. They are in every pharmacy, every grocery store, every gas station in this country. And that accessibility has created a dangerous illusion that they are harmless. They are not harmless, not when used regularly, and not in a body over 60. Here is the mechanism, and I want you to understand this clearly because it changes the way you will think about these medications forever. Inside your kidneys, there are tiny, specialized compounds called prostaglandins. Their job, among other things, is to keep the small arteries feeding your kidney tissue properly dilated, open and flowing. NSAIDs work by blocking prostaglandin production throughout the body. That is how they reduce inflammation and pain. But they do not block selectively. They block everywhere, including inside your kidneys. When those renal prostaglandins are suppressed, the arteries feeding your kidney tissue constrict. Blood flow drops. Oxygen delivery drops. The filters begin working under stress, like a factory running with half its power supply cut. Do this once for a couple of days after an injury. The kidneys recover. Do this every day for months because your arthritis never stops hurting, and the damage accumulates in ways that do not reverse. I want to tell you about Carol. 74 years old, former middle school art teacher, warm and funny and deeply independent. She had lived with moderate osteoarthritis in both knees for about 8 years. Her previous doctor had told her ibuprofen was fine as needed, and she had interpreted that as permission to take it daily. By the time she came to me, she had been taking 600 milligrams of ibuprofen every morning for almost 4 years. Her kidney function had declined to the point where 2 of her medications needed to be dose adjusted immediately to prevent toxicity buildup. She was not in kidney failure, but she was standing closer to that edge than she should have been at 74. We transitioned her pain management to acetaminophen at appropriate doses, added a topical anti-inflammatory gel directly on the joints, and worked with a physical therapist on strengthening the muscles around her knees to reduce the load on the joint itself. Within 6 months, her kidney markers had stabilized, the arthritis pain was managed, and Carol still sends me a card every Christmas. A landmark analysis published in the American Journal of Kidney Diseases found that regular NSAID use in adults over 65 was associated with a significantly elevated risk of acute kidney injury and accelerated decline in chronic kidney disease. The risk was highest in people who also had hypertension or mild pre-existing kidney impairment, which describes a very large percentage of adults in that age group. The message is not to suffer through pain without help. Pain management matters enormously for quality of life, and I want you to live well, not just long. The message is to have an honest conversation with your doctor about what you are taking daily. Everything, including what you buy without a prescription. If you are relying on ibuprofen or naproxen every single day just to get through the morning, that is not a pain management plan. That is a slow emergency that deserves a real solution. Now we move to poison number 2. And this one is fascinating to me as a clinician because the misunderstanding around it is so widespread and so deeply embedded that even well-meaning, health-conscious people get it completely wrong. Most people, when they think about salt in their health, think about the salt shaker on the table. They think, I barely use that thing, I must be fine, and they move on feeling reassured. But here is the reality. The American Heart Association estimates that somewhere between 70 and 75% of the sodium Americans consume has nothing to do with the salt shaker. It is already inside the food before you ever open the package. It is in bread. It is in canned soups and vegetables. It is in deli meats, in cheese, in salad dressings, in frozen entrees, in breakfast cereals, in condiments. It is in foods that do not even taste particularly salty, which is precisely what makes it so difficult to track. The food industry uses sodium not just for flavor, but as a preservative and a texture enhancer. It extends shelf life and makes processed food more palatable. It is embedded in the modern food supply at levels the human body was simply never designed to handle at this frequency. So what does excess sodium actually do to your kidneys? The pathway runs directly through blood pressure, and it is important that you understand it mechanically. When sodium concentration in your blood rises above the normal range, your body responds by retaining water to dilute it. That retained water increases the total volume of blood circulating through your cardiovascular system. More volume means more pressure against the walls of your arteries with every heartbeat. That elevated pressure, hypertension, is the second leading cause of kidney failure in the United States, behind only diabetes. And the reason it is so destructive at the kidney level specifically is anatomy. The filtration units inside your kidneys, called glomeruli, are composed of extraordinarily delicate capillary networks, microscopic, intricate, built for precision filtration, not for withstanding sustained high pressure. When hypertension drives blood through those structures day after day at elevated force, it causes scarring, thickening, and eventually the permanent loss of functional filtering units. Once those units are gone, they do not regenerate. That capacity is simply gone. I treated a man named Thomas, 69 years old, retired postal worker, lived alone after his wife passed, relied heavily on canned and packaged foods because cooking for one felt like too much effort. He had been on blood pressure medication for 11 years and assumed that meant his blood pressure was handled. What Thomas did not realize was that his diet was delivering him somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 milligrams of sodium per day, more than double the recommended ceiling. And his medication, while helpful, was fighting an uphill battle against that daily sodium load. We did not overhaul his entire life. We started with 2 changes: reading labels and choosing lower sodium versions of the exact same products he already bought, and rinsing canned beans and vegetables under running water before eating them, which removes a significant portion of the added sodium. Within 4 months, his average blood pressure had dropped enough that his cardiologist reduced his medication dose. Thomas told me that was the first time in a decade his numbers had actually improved rather than just held steady. If you are over 60 and you have any degree of hypertension, I want you to treat sodium awareness as a medical priority, not a dietary preference. The goal, according to current AHA guidelines, is no more than 2,300 milligrams per day for most adults, and closer to 1,500 if you already have established hypertension or kidney disease. Start by turning packages around. Look at the sodium line. You will be surprised, sometimes genuinely shocked, at what you find in foods you have been eating for years without a second thought. Now, we have covered poison 4, poison 3, and poison 2. And I promised you early in this video that number 1 was different, that it was not just one attack on your kidneys, but several simultaneous attacks launched from multiple directions at once. I want you to understand before we get there just how coordinated this assault really is. Because when I explain the full picture to patients in my office, I often see something shift in their expression. Not fear exactly. More like the particular clarity that comes when something that never quite made sense suddenly does. Poison number 1. The one I have been building toward since the moment this video began. The one that was almost certainly part of your breakfast this morning, that will probably be offered to you again before the day is over, and that the people who love you most may be unknowingly serving you at every family gathering. I am talking about sugar, and its biological twin, refined carbohydrates, white flour, white rice, white bread, the processed grains that your body converts into glucose within minutes of swallowing them. For the purposes of what they do inside your body, they are the same substance. They hit your bloodstream the same way. They cause the same cascade. And together, they are the single most destructive dietary force acting on kidney health in adults over 60 in America today. I want to walk you through exactly why, not vaguely, specifically, because this is not one attack. It is 4 simultaneous ones, and understanding all 4 is what makes the full picture so urgent. The first front is the most direct. Diabetes is the #1 cause of kidney failure in the United States. Full stop. And chronic overconsumption of sugar and refined carbohydrates is the primary dietary driver of type 2 diabetes. Every time you consume a large dose of rapidly absorbed sugar or refined starch, your blood glucose spikes sharply. Your pancreas releases a surge of insulin to bring it back down. Do this repeatedly over years, and your cells begin to lose their sensitivity to insulin's signal. Glucose stays elevated. The pancreas works harder. Eventually, the system begins to break down. Once blood sugar remains chronically elevated, something happens inside the kidney that I want you to visualize clearly. The glucose molecules begin to bind to the proteins inside the kidney's filtration structures in a process called glycation. It stiffens them. It scars them. It progressively destroys their ability to filter accurately. This is diabetic nephropathy, and it is the fastest and most common road to dialysis that I see in my practice. Not occasionally, constantly. The second front is blood pressure. We discussed sodium already, and most people accept the salt hypertension connection. What is far less understood is that high sugar intake drives hypertension through an entirely separate mechanism. Excess sugar elevates insulin levels, and chronically elevated insulin causes the kidneys to retain sodium independently, raises the activity of the nervous system in ways that tighten blood vessels, and promotes the kind of vascular stiffness that sends blood pressure climbing, even in people who barely touch a salt shaker. A study published in the Journal of the American Society of Nephrology found that high fructose intake, the specific sugar used extensively in processed foods and sweetened beverages, was independently associated with elevated blood pressure and early markers of kidney damage, even after controlling for total caloric intake, meaning it was not just about weight. The sugar itself was doing damage. The third front is inflammation. This one is less visible, but arguably the most pervasive. A diet consistently high in sugar and refined carbohydrates drives a state of chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation. The blood vessels feeding your kidneys are lined with cells that are exquisitely sensitive to this inflammatory environment. Over time, that inflammation damages the vessel walls, promotes the buildup of arterial stiffness, and creates exactly the conditions under which kidney disease accelerates most rapidly. The fourth front is metabolic. Excess sugar that your body does not immediately burn for energy gets converted to fat, specifically a type that accumulates around and inside your organs. This visceral fat disrupts hormonal signaling, promotes insulin resistance, and drives a metabolic cascade that places enormous chronic stress on the kidneys. It also contributes to fatty liver disease, which increasingly research is linking to accelerated kidney function decline through shared inflammatory and metabolic pathways. 4 fronts, simultaneously, every single day. That is why I call it poison number 1. I want to tell you about Margaret, 66 years old, retired pediatric nurse, someone who spent her entire career educating families about health. She came to me not because she felt sick, but because her daughter, who had watched one of my earlier videos, insisted she get a full kidney panel done. Margaret did not drink soda. She did not eat candy bars. She considered herself disciplined, but she started every morning with a large glass of commercial orange juice, ate what she described as healthy, low-fat yogurt with granola, had crackers and a sandwich on white bread for lunch, and finished most evenings with a small bowl of what she called just a little something sweet. Her fasting blood sugar had been creeping upward for 3 years. Her doctor had noted it as borderline, but had not yet recommended intervention. Her kidney filtration rate was at the lower edge of normal for her age, not alarming on its own, but trending in a direction that warranted attention. What struck Margaret hardest when I showed her the numbers was not the lab results. It was the sugar content breakdown of her daily diet. Her morning juice alone contained the equivalent of 9 teaspoons of sugar. The low-fat yogurt with granola, 11 teaspoons. She was starting her day with 20 teaspoons of sugar before 9 in the morning, in foods she had chosen specifically because she believed they were good for her. We replaced the juice with half a piece of whole fruit, replaced the low-fat yogurt and granola with plain Greek yogurt and a small handful of walnuts, switched her bread to genuine whole grain with at least 3 grams of fiber per slice, made water her default beverage, and moved her occasional something sweet to a small piece of dark chocolate after dinner rather than a processed dessert. 14 months later, her fasting blood sugar had returned to the normal range. Her kidney markers had stabilized, and Margaret told me she had lost 11 pounds without once feeling like she was on a diet. Because she was not on a diet. She had simply stopped delivering 4 simultaneous attacks to her kidneys every single day. The practical guidance here is specific and actionable. First, eliminate liquid sugar entirely. Sodas, commercial fruit juices, sweetened iced teas, energy drinks, flavored coffees with syrups. These deliver massive glucose loads with no fiber to slow absorption, no satiety to limit quantity, and no nutritional trade-off that justifies the damage. Replace them with water, sparkling water with a slice of lemon or cucumber, unsweetened herbal tea, or plain black coffee. Second, learn sugar's other names on ingredient labels. High fructose corn syrup, dextrose, maltose, sucrose, cane juice, fruit juice concentrate. These are all sugar wearing different clothing. If any of them appear in the first 4 or 5 ingredients of a packaged food, that product is delivering a meaningful sugar load, regardless of what the front of the package claims. Third, prioritize fiber at every meal. Fiber slows the absorption of glucose into the bloodstream, blunting the insulin spike that drives the damage cycle. Vegetables, legumes, whole fruits, genuine whole grains, nuts and seeds, these are your allies. Build meals around them and the sugar problem begins to manage itself almost automatically. Fourth, be specifically skeptical of anything labeled low-fat. When food manufacturers remove fat to create a low-fat product, they almost universally replace it with sugar or refined starch to restore palatability. Low-fat flavored yogurt, low-fat salad dressings, reduced-fat peanut butter, check every label. The full-fat natural version is frequently the better choice for your kidneys. And fifth, this one is specific to adults over 60 and almost never mentioned. Pay attention to your post-meal energy. If you consistently feel a sharp drop in energy, mental fog, or an urgent craving for more food within 90 minutes of eating, that is a signal your blood sugar is spiking and crashing. It is your body telling you the meal composition needs to change. That pattern, repeated daily for years, is one of the clearest early warning signs that the insulin response is beginning to falter. Now, before I walk you through a specific practical routine you can start tonight, I want to pause for just a moment. If you have watched this far, you are someone who takes their health seriously. You are the kind of person who wants real information, not reassurance. And I respect that deeply. I want to ask you to do something right now. Write your age and where in the world you are watching from in the comments below. I read every single one. And knowing who is in this community helps me make sure that every video I produce is speaking directly to what you actually need. Now, the protective routine. Everything we have discussed today, the sedentary patterns, the pain medications, the hidden sodium, the sugar, they all compound each other. Addressing them in isolation helps. Addressing them together is transformative. And I want to give you a specific time-stamped evening framework you can begin tonight, because the evening hours are when most of the damage from these 4 poisons is either locked in or interrupted. At 6 o'clock, or whenever your evening begins, take a 15 to 20-minute walk, not intense, conversational pace. This single habit addresses poison 4 directly by restoring circulation, improving insulin sensitivity for the overnight hours, and reducing the blood pressure elevation that accumulates through a sedentary day. If weather or mobility makes outdoor walking difficult, march slowly in place in your living room, move through the rooms of your house, or use a chair for gentle seated leg raises and arm movements. The movement itself is the medicine. The location is irrelevant. At dinner, Apply 3 rules to your plate. First, fill half of it with vegetables. Roasted, steamed, raw, any preparation you genuinely enjoy. Second, check the sodium content of anything that came from a package and choose the lowest sodium version available, or cook from whole ingredients whenever possible. Third, eliminate the refined starch at the center of the plate, the white rice, the white pasta, the dinner roll, and replace it with a legume, a sweet potato, or simply more vegetables. This one meal, done consistently, addresses poisons 1 and 2 simultaneously. If this video gave you something, a fact you did not have before, a connection you had not made, a motivation that was not quite there this morning, please share it. Send it to someone you love. Post it where the people in your life will see it. The information that can protect a kidney does not help anyone sitting unseen in a browser tab. And if you want to keep receiving this kind of honest, specific, evidence-based guidance, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Every video I produce is built around one goal: giving adults over 60 the real information they deserve to make decisions that actually matter. I am Dr. Pablo. Thank you for the time you gave me today. Your kidneys have been working for you every second of your life without asking for anything in return. Start giving something back, starting tonight.